All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Monday, and this is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group. So, a pretty red day you could see across the board. Asia seems to be holding up quite well through the overnight session. Besides the Nikkei being down 90 basis points, the Hang Seng continues. So, I think emerging markets are continuing to show the relative strength right now. I've mentioned this a couple times. You could see just from this pattern, but emerging markets continue to open on the lows and rally. For the most part, not all of them, but the Shanghai and the Hang Seng, and that's been the pattern over the last week. There's been a couple days now where the Hang Seng has opened on the lows and rallied back, not to some crazy up 2% day, but at least they're finishing a little bit in the green. So that's the overnight market. That's what we got when we came in the morning. But just more of what we saw last week, but a little bit further, obviously. Today was the biggest sell-off day that we've seen, since we made this high back here. So last week kind of felt like a death by 1,000 cuts, even though it was only 5 days, maybe or 5 cuts, but I think you know what I mean. Today was a little bit more decisive to the downside, and we did get a rebound at the end of the day, but pretty, I wouldn't say anything that was really, really constructive, on the rebound from the lows. I think we were a little bit oversold in the short term. You could look at these things on the 1 hour bar. So if you go to the S&P or the Qs, you could see using the RSI, these things really got to oversold. If I said overbought, I apologize. I do that from time to time, especially at the end of the day. But we got to pretty oversold levels on the 1 hour bar. You could see the RSI was about a 17, so it kind of gave you a little place to kind of play that. Usually the averages the averages don't stay oversold or overbought for that long unless there's something really unusual going on. Excuse me. So a couple levels that we found today for S&P, and I'm going to go into the Qs, and I'll spend a little bit more time on the averages because there really hasn't been much option activity. It's been very quiet, which I'm going to talk about that in a minute and how that's kind of been an indicator. But I talk a lot about these purple lines that are on the charts. This is on my indicator. This is a Tribeca Trade Group indicator which uses the value areas, right? So the value areas are this. Or the volume profile is this shaded area. And what happens a lot of times is what we leave behind is when volume doesn't go back and touch an area that had a lot of volume. So you could see from this week, 2 weeks ago, look at all the volume that occurred at this level, and we had never come back to it. Well, today we returned to it. I don't worry too much about they're called VPOCs, version point of controls, an area where there's a lot of volume and price has not come back. I don't worry about these too much, and I don't think you should either unless we start trading below range. So a lot of times what happens is we take these levels out, and if there's none behind them, then we revert back. So you have to look at these on a couple different time frames, and I'm going to go over that. But look at this. This was the only area of support that I really saw besides the 100-day moving average. So you could kind of keep this spot from yesterday. So again, pretty significant. That's the bottom of the value area for last week. We touched there and we bounced. So that's going to be your level to trade against, your support level to trade against. You could call it 2,700 in the in S&P futures. If you want to use SPY, you could say right around the 270 level. I would be mindful of that area. That's actually a little bit less than that, maybe 269.75. And then if I go back to the S&P futures, there was also two of those lines taken out. So the reason why I'm going over this is because usually when we trade below value, price wants to return to areas where a lot of buyers and sellers, it literally can have a memory to it. So notice that it hit this one perfectly and bounced. And then this other one here, again, notice how the price action wasn't in this value area at all. So we did hit that. I actually tweeted that out and kind of felt stupid because we kept going. Again, because a lot of times we take out the last VPOC and then we move higher. So we are now higher above that level. So mission accomplished. We have none of those on the 5 minute. we do not have any of those purple lines left on the 5 minute or on the 1 hour. So I view that as very positive. I do. If we had one more to go down there, I would say you would hear me go, oh crap, we got another. There's another one down there. Same thing with the Qs or NQ, whichever one you want to look at. It's a nice bar, by the way, at the end of the day. Um, we hit two of those, and again, we're now back to where that was. So I don't see another one down further below. So, which is good on the short term, right? These are short term price levels to watch. Same thing on the 1 hour. There was also one that was taken out there, and we took that one out. And as well, same thing. We looks like we found some support here. We actually went below it and came back. All right, so that's, I'm not going to go over too many more of these, but I think that's very constructive. I could look at IWM as well. I think there was one taken out for the small caps, which actually performed a little bit better. Oh, there's one all the way down here, so we'll have to be mindful of that one. So what does this mean for the rest of the week? You can see, yeah, this looks pretty. This looked a lot better for IWM on the daily chart. And I did not show the Qs on the daily chart. I'll bring that up, but we found support right at the top of value and the 50-day moving average. Again, I like that one that lines up together. The Qs did fall into value today. They gapped down into value, or if there's NASDAQ, you won't see a gap, NASDAQ futures. But we found support right at the 50-day moving average, and that's been a pretty good trend line. We spent a little bit of time below there. We touched here and we bounced. So you got a, you have a bounce here on the 50-day moving average. We do have some MACD bearish crossovers, but it's in positive territory. You could see what happened the last time that we crossed over on the S&P, on the MACD. We crossed over here and then we flipped right back over. So I would be mindful of that. We'll see if that reverses itself. So what do we have this week, right? I mean, did this sell-off make sense? Obviously Facebook was in the news, but did this sell-off make sense? Well, I mean, we've got a pretty big meeting on Wednesday, right? It's the first Fed meeting for Powell. It's his first meeting, and I think when there's a little bit of uncertainty out there, I think sometimes it's a buyer's strike. Portfolio managers and so forth, the guys who are doing the buying, sometimes they just sit on their hands and they don't buy anything because they want to see what's going to happen, especially with a new Fed first live meeting. Now, of course, they're going to raise interest rates, but I think everybody's worried, is it going to be 3 or is it going to be 4? So that has to just kind of shake out a little bit and get priced into the market. In terms of option activity, this has been a great guide for us. The last couple of days, it's been on the side of zilch. There really hasn't been much risk taking. People are either waiting for lower levels to buy, or they're waiting for this week's like an all clear sign. And again, it's just how it works. Not that I follow along with this, but I just know from my experience from trading is that going into these meetings, people just don't buy as much normally when that uncertainty, when they're not sure what's going to happen, and then once they get the all clear sign, then they begin to buy. So am I worried about this weakness? I'm not happy that the S&P sold off this much, and we kind of had, and it's been painful, this just slow move lower. But do I think we've kind of washed out some of those weak hands at this point? Yeah, pretty much. So let's go ahead and look at the option activity for the day. You could see on the aggressive side, nothing. So I said this in the beginning of the day. If you're not a member of the Tribeca Trade Group, this is the stuff that we go over a game plan pre-market. And I said, hey, we saw very little. If you go back to Friday's activity, look at Friday's activity. I mean, Coles, I'm not going to buy Coles short-term calls. Sorry, as a swing trade. Same thing with this name, IFF. I mean, that's pretty much, you have to be thinking that the name's going to get taken out. Sorry, I'm not going to buy that name either. But that was literally, other than the U.S. Steel, which was a day trade last week, it's it was very, very light. So coming into today, I said, hey, I've got to see some call buying take place. I got to see somebody besides me buy, right? I don't want to be the only one buying. Um, or same thing with retail investors. You don't want to be the only ones buying. You want the big institutions to be buying. You don't want to be buying in there by yourself. That's not gonna help. The VIX just completely ramped up all the way till about what time is this? This was 1:30. Same thing. Sorry, these are not lining up exactly the same time, but both the VIX, which is again for the S&P, which you probably know, and the VXN, which is for the Qs, up until about that 1:30 time frame, and then it's usually difficult too because sometimes you get a little bit of a lull, and then the VIX can charge up as a lot of orders. You have to remember how orders work, especially like in algorithms, like a VWAP algorithm. The majority of the buying and selling occurs in the beginning and at the end of the day, not in the middle of the day. So we got this little dip, and VIX started to come back up. One thing that I noticed was, and then the VIX faded for the rest of the day, but it kind of looked a little bit constructive. If you go to the Qs for a minute on the 5-minute bar, right when that VIX started to move back up, the we made a lower low here for the day, but it got this is usually a good sign when this happens. When the 5-minute bar goes lower and then the next bar just snaps right back up, that usually indicates maybe that the low is in for the day. Once we do that, we kind of hit that low point for the day that we've been holding on to, and then boom. So again, it was a slow move higher. Really, it kind of accelerated right at the end of the day. And some names had some relative strength to it, but it wasn't really much of the FANG stocks. Those names got hit pretty hard today. That was one of your worst performing sectors. That's the FDN ETF. I sold half my position. I've been somewhat smart with. I don't want to say every trade that I've done because that's certainly not the case. But I took half my position off last week in this FDN ETF. Once we got this first bar, I think it was here. I took half off. I took half of my position. I took profits because remember, I got into the position here on the 12th. Let me just lower my volume here for a minute because I'm getting Slack alerts all over the place. But I took profits the first time that I saw that bullish engulfing candle. I didn't take the whole thing off. I took half my position off. And, maybe now I go ahead and I'll wait one more day. And just, again, I want to see the buying. I don't want to be that first guy who's buying the dip. I would rather be a little bit late. And I know that sometimes it's retail traders when they see this dip, they're conditioned now to buy it. They've got that muscle memory. Every time we get a dip, buy the dip. But I don't want to be the first one in there. I'd rather wait for a little bit of confirmation. Because we have not really received that other than coming back from the lows and the VIX selling off a little bit. I don't see any aggressive sizable call buying. Again, this is what it is. I mean, Apple weeklies. There was this OLN order that went up May 33rd. It was not swept. There was a tiny Fastenal order. This is a pretty small order as well. A little bit of VMware. We've now seen VMware, by the way, 2 days in a row. But look at the put side today. Not crazy, but we started to see a little bit around that 1 o'clock area. We did see a little bit of I think this is a duplicate order, but there was another name. But we started to see a little bit of single stock put buying. So people, I think, are getting a little bit worried. And you could see all the put orders and SPYs and Qs. Somebody also bought XBI puts. This was kind of interesting in the beginning of the day. I was actually noticing the strength, and again, I tweeted this out, and of course, as soon as I tweeted that, it went the other way. But sometimes that's just how it works. But biotech was actually showing a little bit of signs of life right here. And then literally this XBI put buyer came in like 5 minutes after I tweeted that XBI biotech was showing a little bit of strength. This was at 9:52. Yeah, on this bar, somebody bought a huge amount of puts, 600,000 of the April 90 puts in the biotech index, and down she went for the day and really got smoked. So what did I do today? For the most part, I try to sit on my hands for the most part. I had a nice winner in HRTX You could see I tweeted that out a couple times last week. I said it was a nice buy signal that was triggered last week in HRTX. I've been long this name for a while in the trend in the TTG cash trend portfolio. I'm also long. I also added it in my option portfolio too, even though I just added a couple hundred shares. But so really a nice winner. This kind of saved my P&L a little bit today. Up what over 26% today. So again, check that out. You could see, just put in my Twitter handle at CFromHertz and HRTX, and you'll see. I talked about that a couple times last week. So nice trade. I hope you traded it. I mentioned it was a long setup. So that's good when you have a down day and you have something like this go right. I traded a little bit of SMH today as a day trade, very, very quick. I traded it as a day trade and just scalped. I actually just held it. I thought it got really oversold. I get it. It was risk off, but for this to get pretty oversold. So, and I also liked the support here. So I was just in this for a quick scalp. I actually did not hold this through the end of the day. I made a little bit and just got out quick. I said, hey, we have a chance to maybe go back to the lows today. So I'm like, I don't want to be in a weekly trade. And then I bought some Qs on the low today. I did take a small target. I'm wearing the rest of them. They're April calls in the Qs. So I think, again, and I'm telling you exactly what I did here, but I just think we're a little bit too much bad news in the short term, and I think the risk now is becoming to the upside. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get a nice bounce. I don't know what day it happens. I have a feeling that my gut says after Powell speaks and is through, but sometimes the market likes to keep you surprised. So who knows? Maybe tomorrow some buyers come back in and say, hey, that's enough. I mean, things have gone down. How many days have the Qs been down in a row at this point? One or red bars, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a big drop, 5. I think, I would not be surprised if some buyers come back in tomorrow, and then further once Powell speaks. Again, maybe I'm being optimistic here, but I don't think we're going to see. I think it's going to be a sell the news for when Powell speaks. I don't think he's looking to shock the market and bring it down and be that much of a hawk. I think it's just an overreaction. So I'll leave it there for the day. We'll see if I'm right. And have a great night, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow.